Each time we brought the recently deceased back from the dead, they screamed. We didn't know why. The studies and preparation made sense in theory, and yet they screamed. Every time we injected the serum into a cadaver, it would awaken violently, thrashing if it hadn't been strapped down, and scream until it expired. I worked at a facility, one that specialized in the study of prolonged longevity, death, and the possible resurrection of dead tissue. We had developed a new compound that appeared capable of repairing and regenerating damaged cells back to full vitality. All our tests on animals showed miraculous results. Lifespans extended by years, and in several cases, subjects were brought back from recent death. One rabbit, who came to us at the age of 12, lived for another 10 years within the lab. Once we were satisfied with the results, we began discussing human testing. Before moving on to live subjects, we wanted to see if we could bring back the recently deceased. We submitted the necessary requests for cadavers and, after navigating a mess of paperwork and red tape, established a steady stream of bodies kept on ice. The individuals sent to us had died from known diseases and had been marked for scientific use. We tried to ensure that the brain had not fully degraded, so we required the bodies to be no more than a few days, at most, a week post-mortem. The first test was catastrophic. Generally, when we applied the serum to animals, the body would convulse slightly and, as if waking from sleep, the creature would open its eyes and look at us. One dog we tested even wagged its tail in excitement at the sight of us, but for the first human subject, excitement was the last thing on its mind. We laid the male subject out on a table, modesty underwear placed on them for decency. Once prepared, we injected the compound at the base of the skull and waited, usually 30 seconds to a minute, for the serum to begin rebuilding neural tissue. Our theory suggested we'd awaken a conscious person, albeit brain dead. Our hope was to see them fully restored. Both were wrong. The subject tensed its entire body before a wave of movement flowed from the neck, down the arms, and through to the feet, as if, in one smooth motion, the soul had slid back into its flesh. The hands gripped the sides of the table, the head twitched, every muscle fiber firing in chaotic, distorted spasms. His heartbeat began to pulse on our equipment, sending freshly created blood through the body. We watched in stunned amazement as the body took a long, deep breath. We smiled at the results. We did it. Suddenly it lurched forward, its upper half snapping upright like a sprung trap, its face contorted, mouth gaping wide, eyes bulging from their sockets, nostrils flared. Then the screaming began. It was a distorted scream, not unearthly, though it could be described as such. But that was only because the sound destroyed its own vocal cords and esophagus under the sheer strain of what it was trying to emit. It was the sound of an animal, fighting with every fiber of its being to escape. The scream filled the small room, reverberating through the glassware, tearing through me and likely everyone present. It peaked as the body began to shake violently, its hands clawing at its own flesh, as if something unseen had gripped it from the inside. The legs trembled with frenetic energy, as if they were desperate to run, before twisting violently to one side. A sickening crack signaled the snapping of the hip. The body collapsed, falling from the table, its head striking the cold floor with a wet smack. The screaming dragged on for another 5 frail seconds, then stopped with a final broken whimper. Revitalized blood began to pool from the fractured skull. The leg bent at an unnatural angle. The noise that had escaped from that corpse felt like something being burned alive or torn apart. Not that I know what those things sound like, but I imagine that would be the closest approximation. I wanted to end the test there and then, but the others insisted we'd had a breakthrough, and we had to see it completed. With the second subject, we took no risks. He was strapped tightly to the bench before we began. Another male, mid-40s, dead from a heart attack. My own body tensed in anticipation of what was to come. The injection was administered, and, much like the first, the body responded with small, twitching bursts of energy before the spasms began. Bound at the limbs and forehead, its movements were restricted, but not silent. No amount of hearing protection could shield us from the guttural growls and screams that forced their way out of the subject's throat. The entire table rattled beneath him, restraints tightening and tearing deep into the flesh as freshly reanimated blood began to leak from the wounds. Between each shriek and convulsion, the mouth snapped open and shut violently until the tongue was chewed and torn apart. The subject choked on his own blood less than a minute after revival. We had been instructed to intervene only if the subject could be reasonably calmed. If they expired again, the company would simply supply more bodies and more funding. It didn't matter the sex, the race, the build, the age, the health before death, or how they died. They all came back screaming. After staggering through weeks of what could only be described as unholy experiments, we began testing different methods to sedate and prolong the bodies post-reanimation. One attempt stood out. We purposely severed the vocal cords of a cadaver before revival, hoping to silence the inevitable screaming. She was a woman, middle-aged, and already pale from death. When she awoke, there were tears already welling in her eyes, as if her mind remembered something her body hadn't yet caught up with. Her breathing came fast and shallow, accelerating into panicked, rasping sobs, wet, desperate gulps of air like someone drowning in the open. Though she couldn't scream, the sounds she made were worse. Muffled cries slipped from her ruined throat, each one a garbled echo of agony that sent shivers through every person in the room. The moans of pain, of disbelief, grief, recognition. Her eyes darted wildly, bloodshot and filled with terror, locking onto each of us in turn as if begging for help or mercy. Perhaps both. She tried to lift her arms, but the restraints held her down. Instead, she writhed, shuddering uncontrollably, her body convulsing in silent torment. The tears flowed freely now, tracking down her cheeks in trembling rivulets. We had silenced her voice, but we hadn't silenced the pain. If anything, it made it worse, watching her suffer without the outlet to scream. The room was filled with the sound of breath and whimpers, and something else, a low, involuntary whine that came not from her, but from one of the assistants, curled slightly in the corner, unable to look. We disposed of the subject humanely. The effect on the staff was undeniable. Conversation shortened, small talk faded, and laughter disappeared entirely. The jokes we once shared over coffee about playing God felt horrific, even dangerous to say aloud. Soon, silence became our default. We spoke only when necessary, and only about work. Every day we showed up, ran the tests, documented the results, and went home. No one asked questions. The sense of camaraderie we'd built during the animal trials dissolved. The feeling of triumph, of being on the cusp of something extraordinary, turned to quiet dread. The resignations came quietly, one by one. No formal farewells, just an empty desk the next morning. Their replacements arrived with wide eyes and excitement, but that never lasted long. Due to the confidentiality clauses in our contracts, I wasn't allowed to contact any of them after they left. I never found out what happened to most of them, but I do remember one clearly, James. A close friend of mine. He was quiet in his final weeks at work, barely spoke, barely ate. Then one day, he didn't come in. Then I saw the news. He had jumped from the top of his apartment building. I thought about quitting. I really did. But the raise they gave me was too good to leave. Our results were yielding nothing. Every subject we brought back either screamed, wailed, or violently thrashed before eventually expiring or being put down. With permissions, we began to explore the unconventional. We dabbled in pseudoscience and religious dogmata. Anything that might offer an answer, science could not. The people we brought in were paid obscene amounts and sworn to absolute secrecy. Toward the end, even threats were issued. One hypnotist, an odd woman with steady hands and tired eyes, was brought in to help calm the subjects. Her role was to attempt to induce a calm state as we gradually reanimated, stimulating isolated regions of the brain one at a time while keeping the rest. For a while, it seemed promising. We ran countless sessions, and on one occasion, after several attempts and enough sedatives to drop an elephant, a subject stirred gently under hypnosis. There was a breath, a shallow, ragged gasp of pained air squeezed through clenched teeth. Then a single word. Why? It was faint, barely audible, a tremble of soul-deep confusion and grief. And then, the screaming returned, more feral and violent than before. The subject convulsed so hard the restraints tore deep into the flesh. The hypnotist never returned after that session. She didn't even collect her final pay. After her, we were truly desperate. We brought in a priest, an aging man with a cautious demeanor willing to participate in hopes of finding some sort of answer. None of us were superstitious, but something in the screaming had begun to strip away our rationality, our sense of detachment. It felt as though each reanimation peeled back another layer of our humanity, leaving something hollow and shaking beneath. The priest performed a full exorcism over the cadaver as it reanimated. He held a crucifix above its chest and muttered Latin gospels with trembling conviction. Strangely, the body responded. It strained violently against the restraints, muscles taut as steel cords, but it didn't scream. Not at first. The priest's words seemed to still it, but only for a moment. Then the corpse snapped upright with terrifying force, tearing free of the table as metal bolts ripped from the floor. It lunged, flailing wildly. The priest stumbled back, narrowly avoiding a crushing blow to the head, and managed to escape with no significant injury. What followed was not panic, but fury. He shouted at us, eyes wild, accusing us of blasphemy. "You're dragging sinners from hell," he screamed. "You're summoning torment, not salvation." His voice cracked as he ranted and raved, his tone eerily echoing the corpses we brought back. Then he left, stormed out of the facility, never to return. From that point on, armed guards were stationed in every session. Not that it mattered. The sessions didn't last long after that anyway. For one final try, one more attempt to gain any understanding, we turned away from the mystical and into even more eccentric science. We selected an elderly subject, late 90s, died of natural causes, a quiet death, with no visible trauma. We surgically detached his spinal column from the base of the brain, severing all motor function. The body was essentially quadriplegic, incapable of movement or speech. Only the essential organ connections were maintained. Then, we installed a neural interface, an experimental chip connected directly to the brainstem and visual cortex, linked to a computer in the adjacent observation room. It was programmed to interpret neural signals and convert them into written text. Only a few of us remained by this point. We sat in silence behind the thick glass, monitors glowing faintly in the dim observation room. The only other person present inside the subject's room was the armed guard, now a permanent fixture, with orders to terminate the subject immediately if necessary. We administered the injection and waited. There were no spasms, no strained limbs, no hideous sounds of vocal cords tearing. Just the soft, rhythmic beep of a heart restarting, and the subtle rise and fall of a chest drawing breath. The room was so silent, it felt as though the screams of the previous cadavers echoed from memory into the still air. Then the text flashed on screen. "Where am I?" We froze. Even though it was only text, something in my mind gave it life. I heard the voice behind it. An old man, tired, confused. We typed back. "Who are you?" "John Forrester." "Who are you?" "We're here to help, John." "How old are you?" 96. "Who are you?" The information matched. We were finally getting somewhere. Then the next message appeared. "Are you him?" We paused. "Who?" There was a long silence. Then, "You're not him." No. John's heart rate began to climb. The breathing grew rapid. His test flashed again. "You're not supposed to know." We stared at the screen, unsure how to respond. My assistant looked at me, her mouth slightly open, but I said nothing. "You're not supposed to know," he repeated. I looked through the window. John's eyes were open, wide, wet, unblinking. Tears streamed down his cheeks, pooling on the slab beneath. It shouldn't have been possible. "He won't let me back. You're not supposed to know." The cursor blinked. I turned to the screen again, only to see another message. "He won't let you." Pause. "He won't let you." Again. And again. And again. Feel. My heart thudded painfully in my chest, matching the BPM displayed on the monitor. My breathing grew shallow. Then I heard something. Not in my mind. Real sound. I looked up. John's mouth was moving. Impossible. His nerves were severed. His lips parted wider. Sound emerged quiet at first, but real, tangible. "He won't let you." I froze. I shouldn't be able to hear it through the glass, but I heard it. The guard looked to me for the termination signal. I shook my head. "Not yet." "He won't let you." The whisper grew in volume, ragged and forced from a throat that should have been silent. "He won't let you. He won't let you. He won't let you. He won't let you." The gunshot was final. Absolute. The sound rang out across the lab like a gavel striking the lid of a coffin. John's body slumped against the slab, what remained of his expression frozen in wide-eyed agony. The guard, shaking, holstered his weapon and left the room without a word. The silence that followed was suffocating. I collapsed back into my chair. My ears rang, not from the shot, but from the absence of everything else. No monitors, no voices, no screams. Just silence. I didn't know what to report. I didn't know what I just witnessed. The project was terminated soon after, officially deemed a dead end. We were compensated generously. Bonuses, severance, hush clauses buried in legalese, more than enough to vanish, to start over, to never work again. But money does nothing for the silence. I sit here now, alone, typing these words, surrounded by a silence so heavy it feels alive, suffocating, endless. To fill that silence, my mind conjures John's voice, lingering on his words. I now wish for the screaming instead.